Welcome, you're watching Vox News, your daily evening news with Rita Kamkumo. Our headlines today. Places of worship have reopened in Madagascar on Sunday after a month of closure due to coronavirus. Egypt has begun negotiations with the International Monetary Fund to obtain financial aid to mitigate the economic impacts of the health crisis. The electoral campaigns for next month's elections in Burundi have officially started today. In Madagascar, the Protestant Reformed Church and the Lutheran Church, which have tens of thousands of faithful in the country, have decided to reopen their places of worship on Sunday. They had been closed for over a month following the announcement of the first COVID-19 cases on the isle. Authorities have lifted the lockdown in the morning between 6 a.m. and 1 p.m., and every place of worship that wants to open its doors must ask for authorization, according to the prefect of the capital. However, the faithful must wear face masks and observe a distance of 2 meters between each other. Mosques and Catholic churches of the Diocese of Antananarivo have decided to wait a little longer before reopening their premises. On the health front in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the end of the Ebola epidemic is once again delayed. On Sunday, a 7-year-old girl was discharged from the Ebola treatment center in Beni, in the east of the country, which she entered on the 13th of April. She was the last patient at the treatment center, and healthcare workers were celebrating their victory.
We got down to work, and this is the result of teamwork. Everyone put their hands up, and for that we are happy about it. We want to keep up the momentum so that we can put an end to this disease in this country. Thank you to everyone for their contribution.
However, the health authorities announced that they are looking for another patient who escaped. As a result, they cannot restart the countdown to the end of the epidemic, which is 42 days in total, or twice the maximum incubation period of 21 days, as explained by the deputy mayor of Beni.
Are we starting to count today? No, we're gonna start counting the 42 days from the time we find our escapee, the one that got away from the response team. So if he's in hiding and he's listening to us, we're asking him to help the community, to help the sick, and to help all the people in contact around this patient so that we can take care of him.
The appeal was launched to the relatives of the fugitive, reminding them that not bringing the patient back to the treatment center calls into question all the efforts carried out so far. In South Africa, the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic requires international cooperation. The most affected sub-Saharan country is joining forces with Cuba to combat the virus effectively. As a result, more than 200 Cuban epidemiologists and biotechnology experts arrived in Pretoria last weekend to lend a hand to the medical staff of the country already overwhelmed by the disease, which brings to 400 the number of medical staff sent by the Cuban government to the country. After a quarantine period, they will be dispatched throughout the territory. In addition to the arrival of doctors, sanitary kits and medical equipment were also offered to the South African government. The sending of nursing staff to South Africa is part of Cuba's desire to share its medical expertise with other countries. In Western Africa, on Sunday, Guinea reached the symbolic threshold of 1,000 new coronavirus infections, where the pandemic is progressing rapidly, despite the implementation of a curfew and mandatory mask wearing. The country had registered 98 new cases on Sunday alone, which make a total of 1,094 positive cases and 7 deaths, according to health authorities. Meanwhile, its neighbor, Guinea-Bissau, has recorded its first death related to the new coronavirus on Sunday, where the president renewed for 2 weeks the state of emergency decreed at the end of March. In Senegal, amid the fight against the new coronavirus, medical staff in need of more medical equipment fear that the pandemic will get worse, as the number of patients has substantially increased over the last few days.
We don't have enough disposables to manage the COVID-19 outbreak. We need more goggles for the staff, more surgical masks to be able to change them regularly, more FFP2 masks for certain situations, smocks. That's what we need most of all. In Africa, we think it's the climate that protects us a bit, the humidity or the BCG vaccination. But personally, as we see that the number of cases is increasing gradually and slowly, I'm afraid it's spreading, but more slowly than elsewhere. In some countries, they've peaked in a few weeks, whereas we're going to wait 2 or 3 months before we reach the peak of the epidemic. That's my fear.
At Pekin Hospital on the outskirts of the country's capital city Dakar, patients with symptoms of COVID-19 are placed in quarantine, and health workers try to protect themselves to the best of their ability.
When cases are not suspicious, doctors still start to get scared and ask to test the patients before transferring them. So in the emergency room, patients pile up. Admittedly, we get fewer patients with curfews at night, but there are still fewer transfers to the wards. It's getting harder and harder to transfer patients with COVID-19.
The hospital is in the suburbs where there is a large population, so we take in a lot of patients. In the morning, between 300 and 400 before the pandemic. Currently, the patients who come are those with serious problems, but the flow has decreased with the pandemic. As time went by, we have organized ourselves so that barrier measures are respected, such as distancing, hand washing at the entrance of the hospital. Any patient who comes to the hospital will systematically have to go through the triage room where some instructions will be given, such as a short questioning to decide whether he goes to see his general practitioner, whether he goes to the emergency room, or whether he is isolated if it is a suspicious case.
Senegal currently has 736 positive cases and registered its 9th COVID-19 related death on Sunday. On the economic front, Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli announced on Sunday that his government had begun negotiations with the International Monetary Fund to obtain one-year financial aid, in addition to technical assistance to cope with the recession caused by the coronavirus pandemic. During a televised press conference in Cairo, Mr. Madbouli said that the recent shutdown of the tourism and civil aviation sectors was decisive in this new request for international assistance. However, he did not specify the amount of aid that his country requested. The financial institution's managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, confirmed in a statement that she had received a request from Egypt for emergency support through a rapid financing instrument to enable the government to meet its immediate balance of payments needs and to assist the most affected sectors and the most vulnerable groups of the population. She added that the financial institution also works with the Egyptian government to support a solid set of economic programs through a confirmation agreement, a loan designed to respond quickly to countries' external financing needs and to support policies aimed at overcoming crises. Angola's public oil company, SENEGAL, in charge of the hydrocarbon portfolio in the country, has announced the opening of a call for tender to sell part of its assets in 11 companies to refocus on its core business. The head of the company, Sebastião Gaspar Martin, who made the announcement, says the company must get rid of activities that are not linked to its core business and that he is unable to indicate the value of the assets at this stage of the process. This restructuring is part of Luanda's strategy to privatize certain public portfolio assets. Among the companies involved are the financial institutions Banco Bay, Sonamet or Sonadit. Angola is the second largest African oil exporter, but the country is facing a planned decline in its production capacity. President João Lourenço has vowed to diversify the productive fabric to get the country out of its excessive dependence on oil, which represents 90% of the country's exports. On the political front in Burundi, the election campaigns began this Monday. On the 20th of May, Burundians will go to the polls to elect deputies, communal councillors, and the President of the Republic. During the campaign that will end on the 17th of May, 7 candidates running for the presidential election will try to convince the voters. Among them, Evariste Ndayishimiye, who is close to the current head of state, Pierre Nkurunziza, who is not in the running. He will face Agathon Rwasa, the leader of the new National Council for Freedom, who presented himself as the main opponent. Each of the 7 candidates selected and their team will have to speak each day between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. The electoral campaign will take place amid the coronavirus pandemic, but for the time being, no restrictions have been announced on public meetings. In Zimbabwe, a city councillor, member of the opposition party, was indicted for calling President Mnangagwa an idiot for his handling of the new coronavirus pandemic. Crispin Rambu of the Movement for Democratic Change was summoned by the police, according to a statement issued on Friday evening by the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights organization. Police suspect the city councillor of being the author of a WhatsApp message sent to a local group where he compared the Zimbabwean president to his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, in the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Ivory Coast, the lawyers of Guillaume Soro, the former prime minister of the country, are asking the Ivorian authorities to respect the decision of the African Court on Human and People's Rights to suspend the trial against him. Last week, the court demanded that the Ivorian state suspend the arrest warrant issued against Soro at the end of December. The former president of the National Assembly is supposed to be tried on Tuesday at the Abidjan Correctional Court. Guillaume Soro's lawyers believe the purpose of this hearing is to render their client ineligible for the October presidential election. They also indicated that the procedure violates the law and that they will not attend the trial as a result. The trial must address charges of embezzlement of public funds and money laundering, which Soro has always denied. Although the African court gave the Ivorian authorities 30 days to execute the warrant, lawyers of the Ivorian state believe that the decision of the African court is only provisional and does not prevent the holding of the hearing. The former leader of the rebellion has been the subject of an international arrest warrant since the 23rd of December 2019. Finally, FIFA decided to replenish the coffers of its various member associations and gave an envelope of $150 million to its 211 federations to mitigate the impact of the new coronavirus on the football industry. Each national federation will receive $500,000 or 305 million CFA francs to fill the financial gap since the end of the various competitions. This gesture comes after the promise made by FIFA's boss, Gianni Infantino, a few weeks ago when he announced that support funds will be released soon to relieve its member associations financially. According to the Sports Federation, the funds allocated to the associations for the years 2019 and 2020 will be sent in the coming days. The initiative marks the beginning of FIFA's emergency plan to assist the football world shaken by the pandemic. That's it for today. Thank you for watching Vox News.